This took place 2 summers ago, in my hometown of Dallas. I am aware of the human trafficking that happens in this city. I had a coworker pulled out of work and placed into a safe house by the FBI because she finally decided to rat out her family, who were part of a human trafficking operation. However, I never thought they would just randomly snatch people off the street. All the stories I've heard involve drugs or coercion. One day I was cycling to a smoke shop. It's kind of out of my way and not located in a great neighborhood, but I was fairly confident. It was daylight. I ride all over the city, and I know the store. I was 24 at the time, and I had short pink hair, but I always considered myself to be a bit too intimidating to be a target for kidnapping. I guess I was overdue for a reality check. I sometimes forget that even though I have a military background, I'm still a short Caucasian female. I pull up to a crosswalk, and I'm waiting for the light to turn green when 2 Hispanic males start catcalling me from a white van. There were no identifying markings, no stickers. It was your stereotypical free candy van. The way they called to me was a bit off. It wasn't your typical, "Hey, nice tits, let me fuck you," locker room bullshit. They would talk to each other, and then yell through a cracked window about how they were going to get me, and that I was next. They seemed a bit too excited, but I just flipped them off, and the van drove away. End of story, right? Wrong. Up ahead, just after the empty lot, was a brick wall that preceded an alleyway. Not the kind that you can use as a shortcut either. It was enclosed. My guess is this was where the dumpsters used to be. Suddenly the van speeds up and pulls in front of me, blocking my way. They were trying to get me to turn into the alley, which would have been a dead end. This all happened in the span of 7 seconds. Honestly, I didn't panic. I didn't actively register any fear. It was like someone much calmer took over my body. I remember quickly turning and crossing the street without even thinking about it. As I was pedaling up the other side of the road, I realized this was the van from before, and now it had a window repair magnet on the side. It was way too small to look legit, and had absolutely no contact info on it. Just a generic company name. I kept rubbernecking and saw that there was no one sitting in the front, but there was movement behind the seats in the back. The men were now in the back of the van, by the rear doors. They had literally planned to drag me off my bike, in broad daylight, right there on the street, and into the back of the van, to do God knows what to me. Once I passed, they scrambled back into the front seat, and peeled out so hard, they burnt rubber. I got to the store safely, but I still hate myself for not taking down the plate number. Not that it would have done any good. They likely switched it out later. I knew that I had almost been abducted, but it wasn't until I told the story to someone from Mexico that I considered the possibility it was human traffickers. They said that it sounded sadly familiar, and that this happens all the time. As I mentioned earlier, I had known a little bit about it before this incident, but I never thought they snatched people up in broad daylight, right off the streets. I have no family, and I'm not very close with my roommates. I would have been across the border, or dead, before anyone even would know I was gone. In 2010, I was driving from New Orleans, Louisiana to Eugene, Oregon. It was just me, a 24-year-old female, and my 2-year-old pit bull. We were in a 14-foot U-Haul truck with everything I owned crammed into the back. I had one of those fancy flip phones and a MapQuest printout. I think the first smartphones actually came out around this time, but I didn't have one. Cell phone service was also much spottier, and there were long stretches through the desert where I had zero service for hundreds of miles. I was driving on a lonely stretch of highway through central Texas when I realized I hadn't seen a town or exit for a very long time, and my giant U-Haul was running low on gas. Just when I'm about to freak out, I see a small town coming up. When I arrived, I was so worried about other things that I never really paid attention to the name of the town, but there were only about 6 streets in the whole place, so I go gas up and was ready to get back on the road. Except I could not for the life of me find a way back to the highway. I circled the town about 4 times, and I began getting so frustrated because this was such a small town. How the hell could I not find my way out? I could literally see the highway, but couldn't get to it. I returned to the gas station and asked for directions. Now, when I got gas, I paid at the pump and never went in. When I entered, there was a skinny, nondescript guy who had black hair hanging down in front of his eyes. It looked like he could use a shower. He was not particularly creepy, just a bit rude. Our eyes never met. He was looking down at a magazine. He gives me directions that don't sound correct at all. He gave me the name of a road that would get me back to the highway in about 17 miles. For a moment, I was dumbfounded. I then point out that I didn't drive that far to get from the highway into town. Why so far to get back to the highway? You can literally see it from the town. He gives me some explanation about the road curving around that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. He was so casual, almost like I was just an annoyance, and can follow his directions or not. He still doesn't look at me. He then waved his hand in the direction of the door. When I get back into the parking lot, my whole body begins trembling violently, and my heart started racing, seemingly for no reason. Once I got back into the truck and put the key in the ignition, I burst into tears. I had the most terrible feeling that, no matter how nonchalant he acted, the gas station attendant had bad intentions. I didn't know what exactly, but I knew right then and there was no way in hell I was going to follow his directions. Yet, this was the only store in this small town, and short of knocking on doors, no thanks, there was no one else to ask. I decided that I didn't give a shit if this town had dropped out of the twilight zone. I was going to drive around until I found my way out, even if it took me all damn night. Then a big red beater of a pickup truck, as much rust as metal, pulls up and produces the quintessential Texas man. Huge, husky, wearing flannel and work boots. Without even thinking about it, I jump out of my U-Haul and approached him quickly, yet wearily. Looking into his eyes, I could see a kind human being, or at least I was hoping so. I asked him if he could please give me directions back to the highway. I told him I knew it was silly, but I just couldn't seem to find my way back. He looked concerned as I was visibly upset, so he made me laugh and very cheerfully gave me directions for a hairpin curve turnoff right at the end of a small concrete tunnel that I had passed several times. He said it often confuses travelers because it was so hard to see in the dark. I need to put up signs, etc. With a sinking feeling in my stomach, I asked him how far in miles it was back to the highway. He laughed and gave me a funny look. "Miles, miss? I'd say it's a quarter mile at most. You can see the highway right from here." At this point, I couldn't help it. I had to know. "So what happens if I drive?" I gave him the directions that the man in the store had given me. The Texan looked at me very intently and asked me how I knew about that route. It was pretty far out, and usually only locals knew about it. So I told him. He was quiet for a few minutes, and then asked me what the gas station attendant looked like, and if I had a map of the state. I gave him a physical description of the clerk, and said that I didn't have a map, just my MapQuest printout, which was not helpful in this situation. He goes to his truck, and grabs a raggedy local map from his glove box, spreads it out for me, and traces the route that I described. The directions that I had been given led away from town, away from the interstate, and seemingly to the middle of nowhere. The Texan told me that the road did go for about 17 miles, right before it dead-ended in the desert. I asked him what was out there. He told me that there was really nothing, just some junked cars and a few trailers and mobile homes, all owned by the same family. This family was known locally as troublemakers, meth heads, and alcoholics. These were the nice things the townspeople had to say about them. The clerk in the gas station was part of this family and lived down that road. I'll never forget the look in the Texan's eyes as he told me this. He also told me that I was smart to listen to my instincts and said to be careful traveling out there. I don't know if the man in the gas station wanted to see what was in the back of my U-Haul, but thankfully, I didn't have to find out. I also learned that guardian angels can sometimes look like ruddy-haired Texans with scruffy faces driving rusty pickup trucks. Big thanks to that random Texan. You really saved my ass, and I'll always be grateful for that. I'm sorry that I never asked for your name, but you'll always be Texas to me. My grandparents owned some property way out in the boonies of East Texas. I grew up going out there all the time for family get-togethers and whatnot. Now, since it was only a 45-minute drive away from where I lived, I would go out there with friends to camp, party, whatever. It was February of 2014. I knew that I was going to be writing a press release for work all weekend. I thought, why not spend some time in the great outdoors instead of being cooped up in my apartment in Houston? I had never stayed out there by myself, but I had always been keen on the idea and thought this would be an excellent time to do just that. I called up my grandfather, asking if it would be okay for me to use the place for the weekend, and he said of course. He did seem a bit hesitant about me doing it alone, but I was a 24-year-old guy who had grown up hiking, and I felt totally confident that I could handle anything that might happen. Honestly, at the time I was a bit insulted when he seemed to think that me going out there by myself was not the best idea. He made sure I knew how to turn on the electricity and water, which of course I did. I've only done it a million times before whenever I brought friends out there. He asked if I had a key, which again, I did. Finally he said, "You know where I keep the Henry, right?" My granddad is kind of a cowboy and keeps a 30-30 Henry repeater out there, mainly for shooting whitetail, but you never know. Yeah, I know where it is. Admittedly, for the first time, I was nervous. To my knowledge, he was the only one who had ever stayed out there by himself, and he had never really talked to me about his guns. The only shooting I had ever done was with a pellet gun as a kid, and then a camera as I got older. The drive out there was nice after I got out of the city. I left work at 4:30 already packed, and drove straight there. With the Houston traffic, I made it out there by 6:45. Still light, but the sun was beginning to set. I took my duffel bag out of the trunk and went inside. This house is more like a small resort than it is a ranch. It's very nice, which is why I enjoy taking people out there so much. My granddad is pretty well off and had the place built when he was retired. It has 12 bedrooms, and I chose to stay in the upstairs master bedroom. I unpacked, sat on the bed, and opened up my laptop to look at what I had to write, and I immediately closed it. Fuck that. I'll work on it tomorrow. For now, I just want to go for a walk. There's a trail that goes in a big circle around the perimeter of the property and is about 3.5 miles. It was dark out by now, and the thought briefly crossed my mind to bring along the rifle, but I decided on a sturdy 5-foot wooden dowel instead, so if I slipped in the dark I wouldn't shoot off my foot or something. I threw on a jacket, grabbed a flashlight, and headed out. It was a clear, moonless night, and the swath of the Milky Way across the sky was impressive, but it was still really dark out. I didn't use my flashlight so my eyes would adjust, and after 10 minutes or so, I could see reasonably well. It was nice outside. Chilly, but nice. After about 1.5 miles, I decided to cut the route short through the woods and head back. I know the land so well that I could head back to the house from any point on the property. The woods and brush are pretty dense though, and I am forced to turn on my flashlight. A thick wall of twigs and vines was revealed. I pushed through it with my stick, getting a couple scratches in the process. When I see something deeper in the forest, partially obscured by the underbrush, it looked like someone had left a pile of clothes in the woods. I kept the light trained on it for a second or two, trying to see what it was. Suddenly, it jumps up, fast, and sprints further into the trees. My heart jumps to my throat, and my stomach does a somersault. I feel pins and needles of adrenaline surge all over. With all the force I can muster, I try to shout, "Who's there?" But I have no idea what it actually sounded like. Immediately, I regretted not bringing along that rifle. But hell, I had even left my cell phone on the bed. Fucking brilliant. The worst part of it was, whoever it was had taken off in the direction of the house, and I couldn't remember if I locked the door behind me. After the initial shock began to wear off, real fear set in. It is suddenly very cold. Never before have I felt so isolated, and so fucking stupid. I should have never come out here by myself. If that guy shoots me or something, no one will miss me until Monday. After collecting myself, I concluded that I had to get to my phone. I walk a mile through the forest, terrified the entire way. The woods end about 150 yards from the house's front patio, and I basically had to sprint. Now, for any of you who have been in a situation like this, know that running does not help. You can feel that gut-wrenching panic making you constantly think something is right on your heels. When I got to the front door in this semi-sane state, I was in for another shock, since the door is cracked open, and I can't remember if I did that or not. I have to go inside. I push open the door, holding the dowel sort of like a baseball bat, and immediately hear shrieking coming from the living room. I don't think I have ever been as close to blind terror as I was in that moment. I would not have been able to speak. I could only manage a struggled, "Gah!" I sprint up the stairs and into the room where my stuff is, at every turn expecting to see some horrific rotted corpse shrieking at me. I slam the door behind me, and I hear the scream again, from directly below me this time. I run into the bathroom and dial 911, locking the door and hiding in the shower. In retrospect, this seems like a real bitch move, but every ounce of bravado had long since drained out of me. I tried to describe what was happening over the phone, but I'm not sure how much sense it made. There is a small town about 9 miles away from our property, where the nearest police station was. It took them 20 minutes to arrive, during which I heard the scream one more time. It was a lower pitch now, and sounded strangled. Then came the flashing red and blue lights through the window. I was still hiding in the shower, when I heard a man shout, "Police! Anyone here? Come on out." I got up and opened the bathroom door, then heard a voice downstairs. "Christ. Evans, call an ambulance." I then opened the bedroom door, and a cop down the hall has a gun on me. "Freeze!" I try explaining that this was my family's place, and that I was the one that called, but they still handcuffed me. I soon see why. In the living room was the man I saw in the forest, on his back, staring blankly upward, one arm outstretched at the ceiling, and the other bent, but still reaching upward. His head was lying in a pool of blood. We eventually get it cleared up who was who, and that I wasn't the one that cracked this guy's skull open. Later I found out this man was a paranoid schizophrenic, possibly homeless, who had wandered onto our property. Hard to tell where from. We still don't know how he was bleeding. Some kind of blunt force trauma. Maybe he fell. But I'm pretty sure if it was my granddad instead of me out there, he would have been shot. Despite what happened, I still got the press release completed by that Monday.
There's always a reason.